In the January 18th, 2010 issue of Newsweek magazine, you will find an article, that's the lead article in Newsweek, written by Theodore Olson, it goes by Ted Olson, called The Conservative Case for Gay Marriage. Now, you may remember Ted Olson as an assistant attorney general in the Reagan administration. He defended Reagan in the Iran-Contra affair. He also represented George W. Bush in the 2000 presidential election when there was the dispute regarding counted or non-counted ballots in the 2000 election in the state of Florida. Now, this is so. My point in saying all that is that he has the credentials of a conservative. His wife was Barbara Olson. Barbara Olson, if you remember, died in Flight 77 that crashed into the Pentagon on September 11th, 2001. So he certainly has conservative credentials, but he, on this particular case, has gone off the deep end. His legal argumentation, his logical argumentation really are not befitting someone who has held such a high position in the legal profession. There's something else driving his particular agenda. I don't know if it's his new wife, who is a liberal. She has supported Barack Obama, gave $2,000 donation to Barack Obama. A very similar thing happened to Arnold Schwarzenegger. When Arnold Schwarzenegger came here from Austria, he was a die-hard conservative. Then he marries into the Kennedy family, and he loses that conservative edge. You can see with his governorship of California that that's the case. So there's something else driving Ted Olson other than legal and logical and historical arguments. The arguments are just really, really bad. And of course, we can't blame Newsweek because their agenda is to push something similar to what Olson is all about. And it's a coup for them to have a conservative come out and offer an argument for the conservative case for gay marriage. Let's go through some of his arguments. He claims that his support rests on a lifetime of exposure to persons of different backgrounds, histories, viewpoints, and intrinsic characteristics. To talk about moral relativism, that's almost the definition of it here. Well, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to survey what other people have believed about all of this, and I'm going to learn about their values and their choices, and I'm going to make a determination based upon their behavior patterns. Olson's system of morality is based on observing what people do. If enough people engage in certain behavior, then that behavior is determined to be normative. And today's defenders of homosexual behavior have, in the words of Daniel Patrick Moynihan, defined deviancy down so that what was morally wrong 30 years ago is acceptable or at least tolerated behavior today. And this is what has happened. And Robert Bork, in his book Slouching Towards Gomorrah, he explains the phenomenon this way. Emil Durkheim, a founder of sociology, posited that there is a limit to the amount of deviant behavior any community can afford to recognize. As behavior worsens, the community adjusts its standards so that conduct once thought reprehensible is no longer deemed so. And so what happens is at a period of time, there's this flood of new deviant behavior. And the society, in order to deal with it, finally gives up. And changes the laws, and so they can now state that crime has dropped in our community. But what they've done is they've defined crime out of existence. And so where abortion used to be a crime, well, it's no longer a crime anymore. Where homosexuality used to be a crime, it's no longer a crime anymore. We'll sanction this as normal behavior. But what Moynihan says, we have defined deviancy down. And Olson has just fallen into this moral morass, this immoral morass, by claiming that homosexuality has some sort of right. Now, at the same time, what was considered morally normal 30 years ago is now portrayed as oppressive and shot through with pathologies. As part of the vast social project of moral leveling, Charles Krauthammer wrote, "It is not enough for the deviant to be normalized. The normal must be found to be deviant. This situation is thoroughly perverse. Underclass values become increasingly acceptable to the middle class, especially their young, and middle-class values become increasingly contemptible to the cultural elites. So you bring morality down, and at the same time you attack the older morality and calling it perverse. And this is what's happened in our culture. Now you have anybody who speaks out against homosexuality and homosexual marriage, they're considered to be speaking hate speech. This is happening, of course, in England and some of the other countries in Europe, and it's also happening in Canada. So there's a double whammy. The deviancy is redefined as being non-deviant, and the moral standards are now being described as deviant. The problem is with that view, and Olson exemplifies it. There's no moral place to stand outside in his observations of what people do. He has succumbed to the belief that what people do in concert has moral legitimacy. And so whatever people decide to do, they decide as a group to say, hey, we're no longer going to consider this to be deviant behavior, then now it becomes normative behavior. And this is why his idea of his support now rests on a lifetime of exposure to persons of different backgrounds, histories, viewpoints, and intrinsic characteristics. He's observed people and their behaviors and say, well, they seem to be getting along okay, so now let's accept that behavior. Now, like many of the new conservatives, Olson takes the radical individualism approach to morality, law, and politics. The radical individualist fights against cultural institutions that try to regulate and constrain his behavior, such as the church, the family, schools, and so on. These are institutions that have exerted control over society and helped to keep order in society by teaching proper behavior and exerting social control. So now then you attack the institutions that supported the old moral values. Now, this is why there's this real tension in the Republican Party. You have social conservatives and fiscal conservatives, and the fiscal conservatives are all about business and getting ahead, which I'm all about as well. I believe that the free market is the place where you want to see change in society, and I think we're beginning to see the problems in Haiti as the result of socialism in action. The people over there really have not had freedom to act, and that freedom to, and because of that, the standards that for building standards and so forth have affected the way the society functions. What we need is the free market to operate there, and you'll see the change in the Caribbean, in that area. The Haiti is one of the poorest, is the poorest of the nations or territories in the Caribbean, and it's because of its socialistic programs. Now, there are other things here that, especially his view of religion. I have an article dealing with this subject. You can read more about that, about what he said about the Pledge of Allegiance and the religion in the Pledge of Allegiance, and about how it really didn't matter the phrase "under God," because it's just an acknowledgement of what people used to believe. And so to say one nation under God is simply to say, well, this is what our founders used to believe. We don't have to believe in God anymore, so that phrase is okay. Olson's view on religion are really bad. He then goes on to quote the Declaration of Independence to try to make a case for homosexual marriage. And this is, we'll talk about this in tomorrow's show. He begins with this: "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." What he leaves out of this, of course, is the Creator and his view on law. But we'll talk about that tomorrow.